Alright, so the topic of morality and ethics. Arguably topics. For purposes, we'll just use these terms interchangeably and stuff. We'll make the distinction later. Morality can be seen as something that's pre-codified, either evident in how society typically behaves, or like just a bunch of stipulations, Morality is like you go to church on Sunday, or you you um you always shake people's hands, or that sort of thing and stuff. Those dictums that are subconsciously or consciously programmed in people's heads to just make them compulsorily act a certain way without thinking and stuff, which is important for stabilizing civilization, certain levels of society and stuff, because they tend to have issues understanding the concepts or why some things are right and wrong, or forming their own moralities or ethics that either suit their lifestyle or some sort of result or something. But yeah, either way, this is important, and we'll go into that branch of the discussion another time. So I'll just go into like the sort of introduction to the matter and stuff. Morality and ethics discusses what is right, what is wrong, and why and stuff. Now, as for my premises, the purposes of convenience, I'm just going to read this out because this is what I wanted to say. For purposes of convenience of explanation, morality and ethics will be terms used interchangeably to discuss the vast learnable information area of right and wrong and stuff. Moral philosophies are highly critical of what you do, how you do it, why you do it, your intent, etc. But the basal philosophies that many of them rely on, such as Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle, provide the basis and framework. So Nicomachean Ethics can be considered part of the foundation for ethics and morality. Now, is philosophy older than the ancient Greeks? Yes. And it's likely that some ideas originated from the first philosophers in ancient Africa and stuff. But we discuss the achievements of the ancient African civilizations and peoples and stuff later on. Moral stipulation, as with all stipulation, is transmissive of energy and stuff. I've made it pretty clear in another video that rules are transmissive of energy and stuff. So there's a natural limit as to how many and what kind of rules exist before the civilization breaks down and stuff, before it can't do anything. Moral stipulation, as with all stipulation, is transmissive of energy when thought of among human populations because of the need to modify behavior and stuff. Now, there are many people that don't need to do this and stuff, but anywhere from 25 to about 65, 70% of people do. Okay. Now, moral philosophies have been developed by religions over natural history, but the approach to morality is contingent on the individual. Not everyone always has the same capacity to talk, intend, or behave in a certain way and stuff, because these certain things are certainly only accessible or most convenient and stuff, so much more convenient to certain types of characters and stuff, certain types of biotypes, certain types of, I don't want to say ethnocultural origin and stuff. Ethnocultural origin isn't really well, actually no, I'm going to say ethnic, not ethnocultural. We should amend that to ethnic and stuff, because yes, ethnic origins is really not a predictor for morality and stuff, and statistics across many time frames have shown that. Because different types of people behave, talk, think in a certain way, have a different mentality and stuff. This gives premise against the concept of equality. We're not all the same level of good or evil for morphological reasons or reasons of how our personalities are learned and stuff. Now, we can talk about external drivers of behavior and stuff, but we're not addressing external drivers. We're addressing something that's people-centric and stuff. And yeah, we can talk about how the environment and stuff perverts morality and ethics, and the blank slate effect and stuff like that. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It's different viewpoints on it. A person doesn't necessarily do a likable, beneficial, polite thing when they avoid doing a penalizable thing and stuff. And I've said that a few times in other lessons too and stuff. You don't get brownie points for the bad things you don't do nearly as much as the good things that you do and stuff. Consensus morality is basically garbage, and it is. The consensus morality is actually largely driven by personal feelings, money. It's like this soulless thing. Yeah, people. I've seen people upend families and stuff over money and stuff. It's also fear-based and stuff as well. People just simply fear consequences. They don't do certain things. It's not right stuff. Like, you shouldn't just avoid doing bad things, but you should have the good energy to really like to do good things and stuff. That's part of how a person should be. So all you get are internally held or mass programmed substantiations with no time or space transposability and stuff. The consensus morality and stuff really doesn't carry across time and space either. Mathematical testability is not there. Logical availability or scientific availability is not really there. They're all insufficient in this case. Consensus morality should not be should be considered like this obsolete, primitive, garbage morality and stuff. Now, are there some good things about consensus morality? Sure, and stuff. These things are reflected in the U.S. Penal Code and stuff, and they're great and stuff. Things that protect life and things concerning life and property, concerning the treatment of innocent people and stuff, concerning protected classes like the disabled, children, the veterans and stuff like that. That's all fine and dandy and stuff. But basically, consensus morality is garbage. Now, these standards are a lot of the standards of morality are often unrealistic, harmful, and unfair. Ultimately, you are damned if you do and damned if you don't. And that's the problem with consensus morality. So there's always somebody wagging the finger at you, figuratively speaking. And there is no doubt a superseding time and space transposable basis for right versus wrong, which is why right versus wrong absolutely exists. So, a limit to flexibility, and there's a limit to this flexibility which limits how those terms are assigned and stuff. The limit of how those terms are assignable is the limit of the flexibility. Now, there's contextual variation. There is universal ruling as an internally holdable value. Okay. Yeah. We can talk about like two moral realms, like the realms of military operations and the realms of working in a civilian charity and stuff. Two completely different sets of morals. Because in the civilian charity and stuff, doing harm to somebody is not acceptable. In the military and stuff, having, like, understanding that the attack is imminent and the threat is real, and understanding that your enemy is being subversive or creating an atmosphere of fear is real and stuff, so you go and you have the order of battle. The first people go in there in shock and stuff and hit hard, and opening up for the second in the order of battle, third, fourth, and stuff. And you can plunder and blah blah blah. It's a completely different. A lot of military operations are based around that and stuff. So that mandates two different moralities and stuff. You just can't, like, if you can't have a combative person who is anti-militaristic or against violence and stuff. Now, an example from history. U.S. Army soldier, which I won't name and stuff. He was a Mormon. He was devoted to nonviolence and stuff. And in his service, he on his deployments and stuff in the battlefield, he went to Normandy and he saved 75 people, including many enemy soldiers and stuff. probably not, I mean, not the best result and stuff, but the military got what they can out of him, I think, to an extent. But if everybody thought like him, not literally not wanting to touch a gun ever and stuff, unless it was absolutely necessary to save a life and stuff, and not wanting to do violence and stuff, then we would have been cooked. Absolutely cooked. Because Germany was completely out of control, and the German military was completely out of control in Europe. And yeah, and not just Germany, Japan too. Italy actually flipped on the United States, and I think flipped back towards the end of World War II and stuff. So Mussolini kind of dragged them into everything, but yeah. So to cap it off and stuff, the consensus morality is something you should question and stuff. You should learn right versus wrong and understand the contrast between, how people think of it and stuff, which is largely influenced by cognitive dissonance and emotional thinking and stuff. And, just understand the construction of moralities and how they work and why. And understand that for an acceptable level of civilization or better to occur, there has to be a minimum essential morality which is always present. Okay? And that will conclude the lesson.